For 8 years, I was a ghost to my own children, documenting every forgotten birthday in a secret journal. The moment I sold the old house and bought my $675,000 beach house, they came running, not with hugs, but with a lawyer and legal papers, intent on seizing my newfound happiness. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. The knife sliced through the ham, carving a piece too large for one person. I plated it anyway, adding a scoop of buttery potatoes and 3 bright green stalks of asparagus. That was the verdict of December 25th, 2024, another Christmas dinner for a party of one. 8 years I had spent invisible, a ghost in the life of my own children. And this year, the quiet theft of my time felt complete. I was Eleanor Vance, 73 years old, and my world had narrowed down to the hum of the refrigerator and the blinking lights on a small artificial tree. The tree was a lie. Just leave it on the vanity. Lisa, did you confirm the string quartet knows to start exactly at 7 sous? I stood foolishly with my hand still outstretched. The silk robe swished as she turned away, dismissing 30 years of sacrifice in a single movement. Just leave it on the vanity. She tore open the paper, glanced at the $50,000 amount, and tossed the check onto a pile of scattered makeup brushes. Finally, something worthwhile. Thanks. She turned back to the planner, focused entirely on the centerpieces. I backed toward the door, my congratulations lost in the clink of champagne glasses. The great giving had begun, and I was already obsolete. The ceremony was a blur of expensive lace and forced smiles. I walked Faye down the aisle, her hand barely touching my arm, a nervous formality she was eager to complete. At the altar, she didn't look back once. I watched Clyde Harrison, her groom, display her like a newly acquired piece of art, his chest puffed out with a sense of ownership that made my skin crawl. He was the reason for this entire spectacle, a man who married up, seeking pedigree and deep pockets. The reception unfolded at a historic Beaumont mansion, all marble and glittering chandeliers. The elite mingled, their low, rolling conversations about estates and acquisitions washing over me. I drifted to the perimeter of the room, nursing a glass of champagne I didn't drink. I was the financial source, not a valued guest. When the toast began, I was forgotten, left awkwardly standing while others, many of whom I knew only professionally, spoke first. My own toast was generic and brief, met with polite performative applause that felt like a final dismissal. I retreated, suddenly agonizing over the threads of my tuxedo, wondering if it looked rented. That's when Clyde spotted me. He weaved through the crowd with drunken, exaggerated confidence, his voice already too loud, thick with arrogance. He stopped directly in front of me, blocking the exit. His eyes were cold, despite the whiskey flush on his face. "Look at yourself, Ambrose," he sneered. His voice carried across the polished marble. Conversation slowed. Heads turned. "You're wearing a rented tuxedo among people worth millions. You don't deserve to be with the elite." I looked down, swallowing hard, my hands clenched at my sides, fighting the urge to shake. A rented tuxedo. He used my discomfort as a weapon. "This is our world now, old man," Clyde said, his laugh sharp and cutting. "You think writing checks makes you one of us?" "Clyde, please," I managed, the plea barely audible. "Not today." A woman nearby whispered, and the humiliation hit harder than any slap. Clyde had won this small, private war in front of 300 witnesses. The grand entrance doors opened, and the room's energy instantly shifted, a sudden vacuum of attention. Alistair Vance, the legendary European collector, entered, a man whose opinion could make or break careers in my business. Clyde had tried for 6 months to secure a meeting with him, desperate for validation. Alistair scanned the crowd, his eyes passing over the Beaumont elite, past the frozen mid-boast Clyde, and landed straight on me. He walked forward, no hesitation, straight to where I stood. "Ambrose Woods," Alistair said, his voice warm and genuine. He embraced me, a hug that lasted a beat too long. "Wonderful to see you, partner." I felt myself breathe again, a deep, ragged pull of air. "Alistair, I didn't know you were coming." He kept one hand on my shoulder, turning us slightly so his voice carried to the hushed onlookers. "Your family celebration?" "Never. That 18th century secretary desk you found me, an absolute masterpiece." The provenance was impeccable. He finally glanced at Clyde, acknowledging him as an afterthought. "You must be the groom. Congratulations. Your father-in-law has an extraordinary eye for quality. I've learned much from him." I watched the color drain from Clyde's face, leaving him a sickening shade of gray. Around us, the whispers had changed. "They're partners. Ambrose Woods is top tier." "Clearly we misjudged," Clyde muttered to a friend, his voice strained. He stumbled away, broken and deflated. Alistair excused himself to greet other serious collectors. I stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of Clyde's arrogance and the change in perception, yet feeling only a terrible, aching hollowness. My own daughter hadn't defended me. She'd chosen her husband's cruelty over her father's dignity. Across the room, I saw Faye. Her eyes met mine briefly. Then she looked away first. I walked toward the exit. My daughter's laughter, a sound I couldn't remember hearing directed at me, echoing behind me. I drove home through the empty streets of Beaumont, still wearing the tuxedo pants, the heavy air of betrayal suffocating me. I ended up in my study, sitting in the leather chair Eleanor and I had picked out 20 years ago. The walls were lined with framed photos of Faye, her first day of school, her college graduation. In every one, I was smiling, convinced I was building something lasting. Late the next morning, the doorbell hammered insistently. I hoped irrationally it might be Faye coming to apologize. It was both of them. "We need the beach house keys," Faye stated, her voice flat. "We're leaving tomorrow for the honeymoon." "Good morning to you too, sweetheart," I said quietly. Clyde stood behind her, checking his watch. "We're on a schedule, Ambrose. Flight to catch tomorrow afternoon. Do you want to come in, have coffee, talk about—" "We don't have time," Faye cut in. "Just grab the keys." I walked to my study, my hands shaking only slightly as I unlocked the property drawer. I held the keys to the beach house, a $340,000 property I'd bought for her last year as an escape and recharge spot. I returned to the door, extending them with an expressionless gesture. "Faye, about yesterday," I tried again. "What Clyde said to me." She took the keys without meeting my eyes. "What about it? It was perfect. Everyone said so." "I was just joking around," Clyde chimed in defensively. "You're too sensitive." "Daddy, can we not do this now?" Faye was already walking to the car. "We have 100 things to pack." "Sure," I said, retreating inside. "Have a good trip." "We will. And make sure you're available if we need anything while we're gone." I watched their taillights disappear, feeling like hotel staff who just handed over the sweet key card. I wandered to the storage closet, reaching for the box labeled Eleanor's journals, which I hadn't opened since she died 8 years ago. I carried the yellowed pages back to the desk, the faint scent of her perfume rising from the paper. I found an entry from her final months. March 15th. Argued with Ambrose today about Faye's graduation gift. He wants to buy her that condo downtown, $340,000. She needs to learn that money comes from effort, not expectation. He's teaching her the wrong lesson. I stared at her warning, then the phone rang. "Mr. Woods? This is Richard Chen from Coastal Fidelity Bank," the voice said. "We're calling to verify the documentation for the business line of credit." I'm sorry. What line of credit? For Clyde Harrison Investment Solutions, LLC. You're listed as co-founder and personal guarantor for $200,000. The leather chair fell backward as I stood. I was listed as what? I found the documents, but the signature on the line was definitely not mine. The chair lay abandoned on the Persian rug. The silence in the study was broken only by the frantic thudding in my chest. Co-founder, personal guarantor for $200,000. It wasn't just humiliation now. It was organized, targeted fraud. I moved mechanically to the filing cabinet, pulling financial records that dated back 3 years. My hands were steady now, driven by cold shock, not fear. I pulled out the deeds, the wire transfer confirmations, the paid credit card statements, the downtown apartment I bought for her, the countless emergencies that always required immediate wire transfers, the lavish wedding expenses, the beach house I'd paid for just last year. Dean got out of his car and walked around the property like a forensic accountant. He saw my furniture through the window, the old photographs on the mantelpiece, the life he thought was still locked in the suburban house. He snapped photos of the house, the license plate, and the street sign. He was gathering evidence for a crime he didn't yet understand. He got back into his car and immediately called Sandra. "Did Mom move?" Dean's voice was sharp, cutting through the church meeting noise. Sandra was at her school's faculty meeting. "What? You're ridiculous. Mom has lived in the same place for 30 years. "Well, she doesn't anymore," he hissed. "I'm looking at a beach house, Sandra. A big one. Her car is here. Her stuff is inside. She's visiting someone with her whole house?" Sandra's voice was pitched high with disbelief. "No, she lives here. Where would she get the money for a $675,000 house?" Dean demanded. That was the line, the pivot. It wasn't about me. It was about the number. They hung up, and Sandra immediately called me. I was outside, loading boxes into my car. The sea breeze felt cold against my neck when I saw her name on the screen. I almost ignored it, but the anticipation was a bitter kind of drug. I answered, "Mom, where are you?" Sandra's voice was tight. A bowstring stretched too far. "I'm at my house, baby. Why?" I felt a slow, triumphant smile spread across my face. 5 months. It took 5 months. "What house?" I kept my voice calm. "My house. My beach house. I bought it in May, with the money from selling the old one and my savings. It was my money, baby." The silence that followed was total. It was the sound of an inheritance evaporating. I had finally made myself seen, but not because they missed me. They noticed me because I had dared to spend their anticipated legacy on my own happiness. Sandra found her voice, and it was laced with accusation. "You sold the house? The one we grew up in? Without telling us?" "It was my house to sell," I countered, my voice clear and steady. The anger I felt was crystalline, pure. "I didn't need your permission. Mom, that's irresponsible. That's a huge financial decision at your age. You should have consulted us." I leaned against the trunk of my car, the scent of sea salt and pine needles mixing in the humid air. I let the silence hang, then delivered the blow. "Why?" "You haven't consulted me about anything in your lives for 8 years. Why do I need to consult you about mine?" The line went thin. She sputtered for a moment before demanding details. "Where is this house? How much did it cost? Are you sure you can afford this?" I tightened my grip on the phone. "I can afford it fine. I consulted professionals. I'm not answering any more questions. If you want to know more, you can visit me. You know, the thing you haven't done in 3 years." Then I did the one thing I hadn't done in 8 years. I hung up on my child. The fallout was immediate and predictable. My phone began to vibrate relentlessly. Missed calls stacked up from both Dean and Sandra. The text messages escalated from, "We need to talk," to, "We're worried about you." I ignored them all. I turned my phone off, sat on my deck, and watched a trawler drift slowly toward the horizon. The peace was delicious. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about the $800,000 asset pool shrinking. That night, I turned the phone back on. 17 missed calls, 12 text messages, and one voicemail from Ethan. His was the only message I listened to. "Hey, Mom, Sandra told me you moved to a beach house. That's incredible. I'm genuinely happy for you. I know I've been a lousy son. I'd love to visit sometime, if that's okay." It was a small light in the darkness, the only message that didn't demand an explanation or question my sanity. I called him back immediately. We made plans for him to visit alone the following weekend. "Just you, Ethan. Not Dean or Sandra. Not right now." "That's fair," he agreed softly. The following Tuesday, the inevitable occurred. Dean's black SUV, followed by his wife Veronica's sedan, pulled into my driveway. I was having coffee on the deck with Mabel. We exchanged a look of synchronized dread. This was the first wave of the invasion. Dean and Veronica were out of their cars before I could stand up. Dean rushed up the steps, his smile too bright. "Ma, we wanted to surprise you." He opened his arms for a hug that I met with a brief, stiff embrace. Veronica, sharp and predatory, was already surveying the view. "Mrs. Vance, this house is substantial. The view alone. It must have cost a fortune." She was calculating the square footage and the tax implications right in front of me. "Thank you," I said calmly. "Can we come in?" Dean asked, his voice dripping with false patience. I let them in. They toured my beautiful new life, like inspectors. They opened closet doors, ran their hands over the kitchen counter, and assessed the furniture. "How much did this cost, Ma?" Dean asked, stopping by the living room window. "We're family. We're just curious." "Curiosity about my finances is inappropriate," I replied, folding my arms. Veronica jumped in, her voice pitched with false concern. "We understand you're happy, Mrs. Vance, but this seems impulsive. A house this nice, in this location. It had to be at least $500,000, maybe more. That's a lot of money to spend at your age." I stood taller. "At my age," I repeated, letting the accusation hang in the air. "You're worried I'm spending your inheritance, Veronica. Let me be clear. There is no inheritance. This is my money. I earned it, and I'm spending it on my life. What's left, if anything, is none of your concern right now." Dean's shock was genuine this time. His face drained of color. He had banked on the suburban house, on my quiet savings. His financial house of cards, I suspected, was far closer to collapsing than mine. I watched the realization hit him. The money was gone, and I was not the quiet mother he remembered. The confrontation had flipped the script. Dean and Veronica left my house not with answers, but with a terrifying new understanding. I had severed the financial cord. Dean looked genuinely sick as he climbed back into his SUV. "We're just worried, Mom," he mumbled at the door. "Sure you are," I replied, the door snapping shut between us. The sound was sharp, decisive. Mabel was on my deck seconds later, a mug of coffee in hand. "They look like they'd swallowed a lemon, Dorothy. They're done." "No," I said, shaking my head. "They're not done. They just lost the first round. They lost the passive game, so they'll switch to the active game." Over the next 2 weeks, the harassment began in earnest, executed through cautious, coded phone calls. "Ma, did you remember where you put your keys this morning?" A subtle jab at my memory. "Ma, who helped you buy the house? Did someone talk you into it?" A veiled threat of undue influence. Have you been forgetting things lately? Dad's birthday, maybe? A cruel, personalized dig. They were building a case, a paper trail to challenge my mental competency. It was insulting, but I had anticipated it. The moment I hung up with Sandra, I had known what the next step would be. My strength wasn't in wealth. It was in preparation. I called my financial advisor and asked for a recommendation. I was immediately connected with Attorney Wells, a sharp, 40-something woman who specialized in elder law. I laid out the whole story: the 8 years of silence, the 6 lonely Christmases, the $675,000 beach house purchase, and the subsequent concerned visits and phone calls. Attorney Wells listened, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she simply said, "This is not about your welfare, Ellie. This is about leverage. They believe they're entitled to your $800,000 in total assets. We need to cut the leverage." She outlined the strategy. First, we updated every estate document: an ironclad living trust, power of attorney, and healthcare directive, all notarized and witnessed, explicitly stating my sound mind and autonomy. This procedural step was swift: 2 hours of signatures and stamps. The affidavit lands. My window of opportunity shrinks to 0. Second, we documented the neglect. I slid the navy blue journal across the desk. Wells flipped through the pages. March 15th, 2021. Jerome only called to ask for paperwork. Charlene too busy. Marcus sent gift card. Her eyebrows rising with each entry. "This is very, very good," she said. "It shows a clear pattern, and it shows your clarity of thought." Third, protection. "Do you have cameras?" she asked. When I said no, she ordered me to install a doorbell camera and 3 interior cameras immediately. When money is involved, family members become predatory. We need video evidence if they try coercion. I installed the cameras that afternoon. I watched the small red lights blink on, confirming they were recording. The house no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a fortified bunker. Finally, she advised me to contact a local officer. I remembered Officer Bell, the officer I often saw on my morning walks. A kind man who always waved. I found him later that day at the precinct. "Officer Bell," I began, explaining the situation, presenting him with the card for Attorney Wells, and telling him about the recent ambush. He cut me off, his expression tightening. "Mrs. Vance, I grew up seeing my own family try to exploit my grandmother. It makes me sick. I live 5 minutes from your street. You call me anytime you feel unsafe or pressured. I will be there." I left the precinct with a card bearing Officer Bell's personal cell number. I was no longer alone. I had a lawyer, video surveillance, a witness in Mabel, and an officer on speed dial. I was protected. But protection doesn't stop the enemy from advancing. The day before Ethan was due to visit, Dean called again. His voice was no longer pleading. It was cold and controlled. "Mom," he said, "I just spoke with a lawyer. He says all those signatures you just put on that new will won't hold up in court. He says you were manipulated. He says he's coming to see you this weekend. And he's bringing papers." I felt the metallic taste of adrenaline rush back. I had prepared for a visit. I had prepared for a fight. I had not prepared for an immediate legal threat that would target my reconciliation with Ethan. "Who is this lawyer?" I asked, my voice calm despite the internal chaos. "His name is Mr. Sterling," Dean replied, the name dripping with victory. "And he's not asking for a conversation. He's asking for a conservatorship evaluation." Dean's voice was too calm. "He's asking for a conservatorship evaluation." He meant he was asking for control of my life, wrapped in legal language. The word conservatorship hung in the air, a threat to steal not just money, but autonomy. I did not flinch. I had anticipated a battle, not a surprise bombing run. Anticipate the enemy's next move, Robert had always taught me, and secure your own flank. My flank was Ethan. His visit was scheduled for Saturday. Dean, I said, my voice cutting through his pretense. Ethan is visiting this weekend. If you or any lawyer shows up, you will ruin the only chance I have left with my son. He paused, a flicker of humanity or calculation. Ethan needs to know the truth, Ma, that you're vulnerable. We're doing this for your protection. Protection from what? From living my life? I didn't wait for an answer. You bring that lawyer here, Dean, and you'll lose more than just your inheritance. You'll lose your brother. I hung up. I immediately called Attorney Wells. She answered on the second ring, her voice tight with focus. I relayed Dean's threat and the name, Mr. Sterling. Sterling, I know him, Wells said, her tone hardening. He's a predatory elder law attorney. He targets seniors who have recently made large purchases or changes to their wills, usually on behalf of bitter family members. He's under investigation by the State Bar Association for this exact tactic. Under investigation. The word was a hook I could use. What do we do? I asked. We document the attempt, Wells instructed. The doorbell camera must catch them arriving. The interior cameras must record every word of the conversation. Do not sign anything. Do not invite them in. Do not consult them. You are a competent adult who has consulted me. That is the only fact that matters. She delivered the next tactical command. Call Officer Bell. Tell him they are bringing a lawyer, unannounced, to pressure you into signing legal documents. That constitutes undue influence and potential elder abuse. Ask him to be nearby. I called Officer Bell. He listened, his sympathy turning instantly to professional outrage. Conservatorship petitions, Mrs. Vance? That's aggressive. I'll make sure I'm on patrol nearby that Saturday. I'll park a street over. You text me when they arrive. He called me to Maine. It was a gesture of solidarity, a connection stronger than blood. The next 2 days were spent in quiet tension. I was not afraid, but focused. I pulled out the navy blue journal. I highlighted every entry detailing Dean and Sandra's neglect, every forgotten birthday, every canceled visit, every Christmas spent alone. I was gathering my final piece of evidence, not for a court, but for a confrontation. I was standing in the kitchen Friday evening, looking out at the endless horizon, when my phone buzzed with an incoming text from Sandra. Mom, are you really trying to alienate us just because of that house? I felt a surge of cold fury. Alienate? I wanted to laugh. I wrote a reply, then deleted it. I would not engage. I would wait for the confrontation. I walked out onto the deck and looked at the pale blue house that had become my sanctuary. It had been purchased with a clear mind, documented savings, and justified by 8 years of neglect. That knowledge was my armor. I looked at the house. It was a tangible asset, a beautiful, valuable prop that the antagonists wanted. The battle wouldn't be over who was right, but who had the sharpest legal weapon. Dean and Sandra were bringing a lawyer. I had my own. The house suddenly felt enormous, a beautiful, tempting target. I knew what was coming next. Not just a conversation, but an ambush. The legal pressure was escalating from private concern to financial control. I felt the sharp sensory jolt of the sea breeze, and I took a deep breath. I had the cameras, the lawyer, the witness in Mabel. I had the truth. But if Dean and Sterling managed to get me to hesitate, even for a moment, the advantage would be theirs. The price of failure was everything. Saturday morning arrived, quiet and sunny. Ethan was due at 2, but the ambush arrived early, just after 11. I was sitting on the deck with Mabel, reviewing the neighborhood watch schedule, A cover story, but a good one. 3 cars, Mabel murmured. Her eyes narrowed toward the street. Black SUV, a sedan, and a black sedan I don't recognize. That's him. My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt the microcost of the incoming pressure, a sudden dryness in my throat, a tension in my jaw. I didn't flinch. I texted Officer Bell 2 words. Developing? Here. He replied instantly. On my way. Mabel slipped out the back door, moving around the side of the house to the kitchen, where she would be an ear witness, ready to step out as a visible witness when needed. I walked to the front door, feeling the floorboards solid beneath my feet. The doorbell rang. I checked the screen. Dean, Sandra, Dean's wife Veronica, and a slick, pale man in a tailored suit carrying a briefcase. Mr. Sterling. The whole crew. I opened the door. Dean stepped forward, a practiced look of concerned kindness pasted on his face. Ma, we need to talk. This is Mr. Sterling. He's here to help. Sterling, the predatory lawyer, offered a handshake that I ignored. Mrs. Vance, I specialize in elder law. Your children are worried about the recent substantial financial transactions and significant life changes you've made. He paused, giving me a chance to break. I stood silent, the camera recording every line. Sometimes at your age, Sterling continued smoothly, people can make decisions that aren't in their best interest. We're here to discuss your capacity to manage your affairs. The best protection is a signed power of attorney, granting them oversight of your finances. I didn't look at him. I looked at Sandra, whose eyes were fixed firmly on the granite countertops. Then Dean. He looked determined to reclaim what he thought was his. Veronica looked, as Mabel later described, hungry. I delivered my line, hitting them where it hurt most. Where were you last Christmas, Dean? He stumbled. Ma, what does that have to do with this? I was with Veronica's family, you know that. And you, Sandra? Where was Marcus? I asked. Sandra blurted, Marcus isn't included in this. This is just us. Of course he isn't, I said, because he'd tell you this is disgusting, that what you're doing right now is financial exploitation. I stepped back, revealing the interior of the house. Sterling regained control. Mrs. Vance, let's stay focused. We think it's best if you sign these documents for your own protection. Protection from what? I asked, meeting his eyes. From being happy? From spending my own money? From mistakes that could leave you destitute, Sterling said, his voice lowering to a professional threat. A house this expensive at your age, with limited income, it's risky. Your children don't want you to run out of money and lose everything. I'm not going to run out of money, I replied, maximizing clarity of purpose. I planned carefully. I consulted professionals. I'm mentally sound and perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. Dean cut in. Ma, stop being difficult. We're trying to help you. No, I said, one word, declarative. You're trying to control me. There's a difference. The air felt thinner than air. That was the moment Mabel walked out from the kitchen, surprising them all. Mabel's entrance was perfectly timed, breaking the leverage game. Dean recoiled. Who the hell is this? He demanded. Lucille Patterson, Ellie's neighbor and friend. Mabel stated clearly. I've been here the whole time. I heard every word. Sterling, the lawyer, looked nervous, his face turning pale. This is a private family matter. You have no right. I have every right, Mabel shot back, stepping closer. This is Ellie's house. I'm a witness to what's happening here. A witness to you trying to coerce an elderly woman into signing legal documents. That's financial exploitation. Elder abuse. It's illegal. The accusation was a clean shot. The threat swung immediately toward them. I stepped forward, activating my second line of defense. I have cameras too. The doorbell camera caught all of you arriving. The interior cameras have recorded this entire conversation. Dean's face went white. You have cameras? I do, I confirmed, because my lawyer told me this might happen. She told me that when money is involved, even family members can become predatory. She was right. Sandra's voice was a whisper. You have a lawyer? Of course I have a lawyer, I declared. I'm not the senile old woman you think I am. I'm a 73-year-old woman who worked for 35 years, saved her money, made smart investments, and decided to enjoy her life. And I was smart enough to protect myself from people who would try to take that away. Sterling tried one last desperate attempt. Mrs. Vance, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We were simply offering advice. If you were trying to help, you would have asked what I needed, I countered. Instead, you showed up with legal documents trying to scare me into signing away my rights. That's not help. That's exploitation. Just then, a firm official knock rattled the door. I opened it. Officer T-Main Bell stood in uniform, his presence an immediate and powerful reversal of control. Mrs. Vance, I got your text. Everything okay here? Sterling immediately went into lawyer mode. Officer, there's no problem here. Just a family matter. Family matters that involve coercion and potential elder abuse are police matters, Bell stated firmly. He looked at me. Ma'am, did these people threaten you or attempt to make you sign documents under duress? Yes, officer, I said, meeting Bell's gaze. Mr. Sterling here told me I needed to sign documents giving my children control of my finances. He questioned my mental capacity. He tried to pressure me into signing without allowing me to consult my own attorney. I refused, and my neighbor witnessed the entire exchange. It's also recorded on my security cameras. Bell's expression hardened. He turned to the Sterling. Sir, I'm going to need to see your identification and those documents you mentioned. Sterling fumbled, producing his bar card and a stack of papers. Bell reviewed them carefully. His jaw tightened. These are conservatorship petitions. Mrs. Vance, did you request a conservatorship evaluation? Absolutely not, I said. The line was crossed. The stake had escalated from financial to legal to public. Officer Bell looked at Dean and Sandra. And you two brought this attorney here to do what exactly? Dean rushed to fill the silence. Officer, our mother just spent a fortune on this house. We're worried about her. She's 73 years old and making huge financial decisions without family input. We just want to make sure she's protected. Protected from what? Bell interrupted. From living her life? From spending her own money? From making her own choices? From blowing through all her money and having nothing left, Veronica blurted out, sealing their true motive. Left for you, you mean? Mabel's voice cut in from behind me. Bell held up his hand, silencing Mabel, then turned back to Sterling. Mr. Sterling. Attempting to get an elderly person to sign legal documents without independent counsel present, especially documents that would strip them of their financial autonomy, is a serious matter. It could constitute undue influence or exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Sterling's gray face was slick with sweat. Officer, I was simply offering legal advice. Mrs. Vance's children hired me in good faith. Good faith? I interrupted, walking to my bookshelf. I pulled out the navy blue journal. My children haven't visited me in years. They forgot my birthdays. They left me alone every Christmas. They only showed up when they discovered I had assets they wanted. That's not good faith. That's greed. I opened the journal to the Christmas entries. December 25th, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. 6 Christmases I spent completely alone while you celebrated with other people's families. 6 years of calling you Christmas morning and getting voicemail. I slammed the book shut. I documented everything, I said, my voice ringing with finality. Every forgotten birthday, every unreturned phone call, every canceled visit. I knew that someday you'd question my decisions. The reason I made the choices I made isn't because I'm senile. It's because I finally stopped waiting for children who don't care. The room was silent. Dean stared at the floor. Sandra had tears running down her face. Officer Bell spoke, his voice firm and commanding. Mrs. Vance, do you want these people to leave your property? Yes, I said, and I do not want them to come back without an explicit invitation from me. Bell turned to the group. All right, Dean, Sandra, Veronica, and Mr. Sterling. You need to leave now. If you return to this property without Mrs. Vance's explicit permission, I will arrest you for trespassing. Do you understand? Dean protested. Officer, this is our mother. We have a right. You have no rights to her property or her autonomy, Bell stated. She is a competent adult who has made her own decisions. The fact that you don't like those decisions doesn't give you legal standing to override them. Now leave, or I'll add harassment to the potential charges list. Sterling grabbed his briefcase, his composure evaporating. He practically ran for the black sedan. Dean and Sandra lingered in the doorway, defeated. Sandra's facade shattered. Mom, she choked out, tears running down her face. I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I didn't think about how alone you must have felt. That's the problem, Sandra, I said quietly, the pain sharp in my chest. You didn't think about me at all. I was invisible to you, and now that I have something you want, suddenly you care. Dean tried to save face. That's not true, Mom. We've always cared. Really? I asked. Then why didn't you call? Why did I spend 8 years feeling like a burden when I reached out, and a ghost when I didn't? They had no answer. They stood exposed, their greed laid bare by the cameras and the badge. You need to leave, I said. Both of you. And you need to think long and hard about what kind of people you've become. The children I raised would never have done this. Dean tried one last time. We weren't trying to steal. Yes, you were. I cut him off, final and absolute. You were trying to take control of my assets. That's theft. It doesn't matter if you wrapped it in legal language, it was theft. They left slowly, pulling out of the driveway one after the other. Officer Bell stayed until he saw their cars disappear down the street. Mrs. Vance, I'm filing a detailed report about this incident, Bell said. I'm also going to recommend you contact your attorney about getting a restraining order if they continue to harass you. Thank you, T-Main, I said, using his first name. He nodded and drove off. The adrenaline crashed, leaving me weak and shaking. Mabel sat beside me on the couch. You did good, Ellie. You stood up for yourself. I just threw my own children out of my house, I whispered, the exhaustion hitting me. What kind of mother does that? The kind who has been pushed too far, Mabel said, pulling me into a hug. They brought this on themselves. Don't you dare feel guilty. My tears were not of regret, but grief. Grief for the family I had imagined, and the realization that it was long gone. That evening, I called Attorney Wells and detailed the entire scene. You need to file for a restraining order, she said, her voice firm. Tomorrow. I'll start the paperwork tonight. Then came the second piece of justice. And Ellie, I'm also reporting Mr. Sterling to the State Bar Association. Your case, combined with your evidence, might be the one that finally gets his license suspended. Do what you need to do, I said. I was done protecting people who wouldn't protect me. The texts and calls started again the next day, angrier, more accusatory. How could you do this to your own children? You're making a huge mistake. You'll regret this. I blocked their numbers. I went to court with Attorney Wells. The judge reviewed the journal, the video footage, Bell's report, and Mabel's witness statement. The judge looked at me. Miss Vance, I'm sorry your children put you through this. You have every right to live your life in peace. The restraining order was served. Dean and Sandra were legally barred from contacting me or coming within 500 FT of my property for 1 year. I had used the law to draw a firm boundary. 2 weeks after the legal hammer fell, my phone rang. It was Ethan. I had forgotten I hadn't blocked his number. "Mom," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "Sandra told me what happened. I'm so sorry." "Did she tell you the whole story, Ethan?" I challenged him. "She told me they brought a lawyer to your house to try to get you to sign over power of attorney. She told me you had cameras, a witness, and called the cops. She told me you got a restraining order." "And what did she leave out?" I asked. He sighed. "I'm guessing a lot. Can I come see you? Just me. I want to hear your side. And Mom, I want to apologize for all of it. For disappearing after my divorce, for not calling, for not being there. You deserved better." I hesitated. This was the vulnerability ping, a risky ask. If he was working for Dean and Sandra, the emotional cost would be devastating. But the alternative, closing the door on the one son who hadn't actively tried to betray me, was worse. "You can come," I finally agreed. "But Ethan, if you're coming because Dean and Sandra sent you to smooth things over, don't bother. I'm done." "I'm not. They don't even know I'm calling you," he promised. "I'm coming because I miss my mom and because I've been a terrible son, and I want to do better." Saturday at 2. I waited on my deck, nervous. Mabel was next door, on alert. When Ethan arrived, he came alone. He got out of his car and just stood there for a moment, looking at the pale blue house. "Mom, this place is beautiful," he said, the words genuine. He sat across from me. He looked tired, worn down by his own messy life. He started talking about the divorce, the shame, and the guilt that had made him pull away. "I told myself I was protecting you from my problems, but really I was just hiding from everything," he confessed. The guilt made it harder to pick up the phone, which made me feel more guilty. It was this terrible cycle. "You could have broken the cycle any time, Ethan," I said quietly. "I know. And I'm not making excuses. It wasn't that I didn't love you. It's that I was drowning, and I didn't know how to reach out." He winced when he mentioned the Christmases and birthdays. There's no excuse for those. I was selfish. I was wrapped up in my own pain. "I was very alone," I said. "For 8 years I was invisible to you, to all of you." He asked to see the journal. I went inside and brought it back. I watched his face as he read page after page. Shame, guilt, grief. When he got to the Christmas entries, he started crying openly. "Oh, Mom, I didn't know it was this bad." "You didn't know because you didn't ask," I said. "None of you asked." He closed the journal. "We got comfortable with your absence. We told ourselves you were fine, that you understood. But that was a lie we told ourselves so we didn't have to feel guilty." Ethan looked out at the ocean, composing himself. "And then Dean found out about this house. Suddenly everyone cared. But not about you, Mom. About the money. About what they thought they were entitled to. It's disgusting." I nodded. "You weren't part of the ambush." "Only because they didn't tell me," he admitted honestly. "But a few years ago, I might have gone along with it because I was that entitled, that blind. Therapy changed that." "What do you want from me, Ethan?" I asked, looking at my youngest son. "A chance. Just a chance to be your son again, to actually show up. Not because you have money or a beach house, just because you're my mom and I love you. And if I say no, then I'll respect that, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting that I waited too long. I sat with that for a long moment, watching the waves. This was the leitmotif line. I'm done waiting for children who don't show up was now transforming into, I'm done waiting for people who don't value me. Okay, I finally said, the word costing me a great deal. One chance. But Ethan, if you disappear again, I'm done. I'm too old to keep hoping. I'll show up, he promised. I swear to God I'll show up. And he did. We walked on the beach, talking for hours. He told me about his life, and I told him about mine. Mabel, Pastor Elena, the Reyes children. I'm glad you bought this house, Mom, he said, watching the sunset. You deserve it. Dean and Sandra are wrong. This wasn't a mistake. Over the following months, Ethan kept his promise. He visited once a month, called every week, and sent texts just to check in. Small things, but consistent things. Slowly, carefully, we started rebuilding. Dean and Sandra, on the other hand, went silent. The restraining order was in place. Through Ethan, I heard they were furious. They were consulting other lawyers, trying to find a loophole to challenge my mental competency. The new crucial detail arrived in a guarded text from Ethan. Dean had massive, undisclosed debt from a failed business venture. He'd been counting on inheriting from me to pay it off. When that didn't happen, his financial house of cards collapsed. This was the promised consequence beat. Dean had to sell his house, downsize significantly, and file for bankruptcy. Veronica left him shortly after. I felt a slight tremor of sadness, but mostly nothing. He had made his choices, and he was living with the consequences. Sandra, however, was consumed with bitterness, convinced I was the villain who stole her family's wealth. The battle was over the money, but the war was over the narrative. The consequences were just beginning to cascade. Attorney Wells called to report on Mr. Sterling. The complaint I filed, combined with my video evidence and Bell's report, was the final nail. Sterling's law license was suspended for 2 years. He had built a practice on exploiting elderly people, and he finally faced consequences. Karmic justice, delivered by an organized woman. The restraining order expired after a year. Neither Dean nor Sandra reached out, not to apologize, not to reconcile. Nothing. That final silence told me everything. They weren't sorry for what they'd done. They were just sorry it hadn't worked. The antagonist's malice now shifted to a new target. Sandra's daughter, Chloe. Chloe, now 18, asked to visit me, a choice that immediately triggered conflict. Sandra forbade it. I don't want you around that woman, she'd said. Chloe waited until she turned 18, got my address from Ethan, and showed up at my door one sunny Saturday afternoon. Grandma Ellie? She asked nervously when I opened the door. I'm Chloe. I don't know if you remember me. Of course I remember you, baby. Come in. She walked through the house, marveling at the ocean view. Mom said, she said a lot of things, but this is really nice. We sat on the deck for hours. Chloe told me about her mother's constant anger. She says you abandoned the family, but Uncle Ethan told me the truth, that it was the other way around. Your mother sees what she wants to see, I said gently. She's made me the villain, so she doesn't have to face her own guilt. That's not fair to you. Chloe visited me regularly after that, finding solace and truth away from her mother's bitterness. She became one of the unexpected joys of my new life. Sandra was predictably furious. Ethan relayed her text. You're poisoning Chloe against me. I laughed. I never said a bad word about my daughter to Chloe. I didn't have to. Chloe was smart enough to figure things out on her own. The escalating fallout moved from legal to social, impacting the next generation. I felt a fierce protectiveness toward Chloe, a final, concrete consequence of Dean and Sandra's greed. They had tried to steal my money. They ended up losing their mother. And now, Sandra was losing her daughter's trust. One afternoon, I was with Mabel when a notice arrived from the HOA. It was about my new exterior color, the pale blue. The letter claimed it violated a long-dormant covenant regarding coastal appropriate palettes. The notice was signed by the current HOA president, Veronica Vance, Dean's ex-wife. She was still fighting the proxy war. The battle for my money had now become a public conflict over my paint color. The HOA notice was a micro-clock. It gave me 30 days to repaint the pale blue house or face escalating fines. It was a petty, vicious strike, orchestrated by Veronica, who was still trying to hurt me on Dean's behalf. They were using bureaucracy as a weapon. I took the notice to Attorney Wells. She smiled, shaking her head. Petty, desperate, and predictable. We'll turn this into a final legal jab. She didn't write a long procedural brief. Instead, she executed a legal microcapsule. HOA notice lands. My deadline shrinks to 30 days. I signed a letter, paying a small fee. Consequence? Wells filed an immediate injunction against the HOA's enforcement of the outdated covenant. The consequence in the world. Veronica's power play was immediately blocked. Antagonist pressure. Veronica called the local paper, leaking a false story about a neighborhood dispute involving a difficult, non-compliant elderly resident who was mismanaging her affairs. The conflict escalated to the public rung. Confrontation. I didn't engage with the paper. Instead, I had a conversation with Pastor Elena. I showed her the HOA notice and the news clipping. They're trying to smear my reputation in the community I love, I confessed, a vulnerability ping. Pastor Elena did not hesitate. We are a community that protects our own, Sister Ellie. The next day, she organized a church meeting, turning the conflict into a social reckoning. Mabel, Javier, and Carmen Reyes showed up. The community rallied, writing letters to the HOA and the paper, defending Grandma Ellie, the woman who volunteered, the woman who cared for their children. The public defense flipped the control. Veronica's attempt to shame me backfired. She was forced to resign from the HOA board a week later, humiliated. 2 years after I bought my beach house, Christmas Day arrived. The loneliness was gone. This Christmas was different. Ethan arrived at 10 with gifts and groceries. Mabel came over at noon with her famous sweet potato pie. Pastor Elena stopped by with a poinsettia. The Reyes children ran over with homemade cards. We love you, Grandma Dot. Chloe arrived at 2, bringing presents and apologies for her mother. We gathered around my table, the one that had once been set for one lonely woman. We held hands and said grace. We ate and laughed and told stories. We celebrated not the family we were born into, but the family we chose. That night, after everyone had gone, I sat on my deck wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars over the ocean. My phone buzzed with texts. Ethan, Chloe, Mabel. I smiled. The pain of the last 8 years had led me here. The beach house was proof that I valued myself even when my children didn't. I looked out at the waves, thinking about the journey, the loneliness, the neglect, the decision to stop waiting and start living. The beach house had changed everything. Dean and Sandra had thought they were entitled to my money, my house, my assets. They thought I was a helpless old woman who could be manipulated. They were wrong about all of it. I was exactly who I'd always been, a strong woman who'd worked hard, saved carefully, and made smart decisions. A woman who refused to be taken advantage of, even by her own children. The beach house wasn't just a house. It was proof that I could be happy even without their approval. It was proof that sometimes the best thing you can do is stop waiting for people to love you and start loving yourself instead. I pulled out my phone and looked at my photos from the day. Ethan laughing in my kitchen. Chloe and me walking on the beach. Mabel raising her wine glass in a toast. The Reyes children playing in my living room. This was family. This was love. 8 years I'd spent invisible to my own children. And when they showed up at my door with a lawyer trying to take what they thought was theirs, they had no clue I had witnesses, cameras, and a cop by my side. They had no clue I'd been preparing for this moment. They tried to take my house. Instead, they'd lost a mother, and I'd lost 2 children I'd been grieving for years anyway. But what I'd gained was worth so much more. Peace, joy, real relationships, a home I loved, and the knowledge that I was strong enough to stand up for myself. I raised my mug of tea to the stars. Here's to beach houses, I whispered, and second chances, and knowing your worth, and to never ever being invisible again. Tomorrow, I would wake up in my beautiful house by the ocean. I'd have coffee with Mabel. I'd take my morning walk. I'd babysit the Reyes children. I'd live my life. My peaceful, happy, hard-won life. And somewhere out there, Dean and Sandra were probably still angry, still bitter, still telling themselves I was the villain. But that was their story to live with, not mine. My story had a better ending. One where I built a new family from friends and neighbors, and the one child who'd been brave enough to change. One where I woke up every morning grateful for the life I'd created. I finished my tea and went inside, looking one last time at the pale blue house. My sanctuary. My proof that it's never too late to choose yourself. I had spent every Christmas alone until I bought a beach house, and then everything changed. Not because my children suddenly cared, but because I finally did. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.